Well, after allegedly contracting a cold earlier this week, the president cancelled all of his official engagements, including consultative meetings with national ANC officials and tripartite alliance partners. He now faces harsh criticism from the opposition after seemingly being well enough to attend a cattle auction dinner at his Phala Phala farm in Limpopo. The city press has reported that the president is expected to announce his new cabinet later today. This is despite a presidential spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya, highlighting that no date had been set for the announcement. Well, to discuss these developments and more, I'm joined by political analyst Professor Dirk Kotze. Prof, thank you so much for your time and thank you for joining us this morning. Very quickly, what do you make of some of the reporting that we've been seeing this morning, certainly in our Sunday newspapers, with regards to this impending cabinet reshuffle? The idea, the narrative really, being that it's a massive delay and it's only showing the president, or at least highlighting the president, to be someone who's evading the task that lies ahead of him.
Yes, that is definitely how the public is viewing it at the moment. I think at the same time, one has to be fair and say, well, there is no deadline for this. The president can decide even to cancel it. If he doesn't feel that he wants to announce a new cabinet. So it's absolutely within his power to decide when and how and who will be involved in this. I think what has happened is that they created a public expectation, and now they struggle to manage this public expectation. And that, I think, is the cause, or is the reason why so many people now feel irritated by the fact that he hasn't made this announcement. What we've seen, and I think this is part of what has drawn out this process so much, is how many new persons have been brought in from outside Parliament in order to be able to qualify as new ministers. This is a new trend which hasn't been the case in the past because the Constitution says that all ministers except for two must be members of Parliament. And that has limited the options for President Ramaphosa. And I think this time he used that in order to change the membership of persons to become members of Parliament much more significantly than any time before.
Yeah. I mean, the other issue here, Prof, is, the matter of urgency and expediency, because we've had, several departures that really have kind of fueled this idea of there being a need for an urgent announcement. We have, Ayanda Jojo, who of course vacated as Minister of Public Service and Administration a year ago to join the World Bank. We have more recently Deputy President David Mabuza resigning as a member of Parliament. And of course we have the President's own announcement made during his State of the Nation address, that of being the appointment of a Minister of Electricity, a minister who is essentially appointed to solely deal with the country's load shedding crisis. And the rolling blackouts, I don't think I need to go into that, how much, that is exacerbating the country's current economic situation. So there is an urgency, there is an expediency, and so while no date has been set, there is that expectation that needs to be met.
Yes, that's what I mean by the public expectation that exists. And they have created it. The presidents have created this expectation. And that is why there is now this pressure on him in order to make the announcement. I think later on we will know what is exactly the delay now. Likely since Thursday or Friday, when he uses the argument that he had a cold. But clearly that couldn't keep him away from continuing with some of this work. So there's something is delaying this process, which we don't know about yet.
All right. Well, I want us to talk about that a little bit. We're obviously not privy to what is causing the delay, but there have been several developments since then. And there's a lot of talk around, the balancing act that the president has to pretty much go through as he, makes up his mind with regards to the names that he wants to proffer up into these positions. Coming out, of course, of the ANC elective conference, there were a few individuals, including Fikile Mbalula, appointed as Secretary General. creating vacancies. We also have Deputy President David Mabuza not being elected as ANC Deputy President, and the questions around the future of Paul Mashatile and when he will emerge as, his number 2 in the union buildings. But what other factors, what other elements could the President be balancing in this particular moment?
Well, one other important factor that he has to take into account is the fact that he must create more space for members from KwaZulu-Natal. We know that in the top 7 of the ANC that were elected in December at the ANC's conference, none of them come from KwaZulu-Natal. So that's an obvious deficiency, I can almost say, that exists in the top leadership of the ANC at the moment. So what we are seeing is, for example, a former premier like Cyril Ramaphosa has been brought in and is clearly one of the possible candidates to become a minister. We also look at other persons from KwaZulu-Natal that will either be re-elected, for example, Bheki Cele, but there's speculation that he might be moved to another portfolio, and some others also. So also from Gauteng. Gauteng appears to be now a very strong factor within the ANC. Paul Mashatile is as the ANC's deputy president is a major presence in it. Some talk about David Mabuza. So there's an influx of former premiers that are coming towards the cabinet also. The argument most possibly is that they have valuable experience at a very senior level that can be used in cabinet. And then persons from outside, like for example, Sputnik Rabanghopa is regarded as a front runner for the position of the Minister of Electricity. He must get a position in Parliament. Morupin Ramaghopa also, who's mainly from Limpopo, who was one of the conveners of the Women's League task team. She has been brought into Parliament, so she represents the Limpopo. They have to compensate for the fact that Stan Matabata lost with only about 40 votes against Gwede Mantashe for the position of national chairperson. So that is a consideration, I think, which is playing a role in the way in which he tries to set up his cabinet. Then the question about younger persons. She is also a younger person. She's a woman. Those factors all play a role. And as well as the fact that in some portfolios, for example, that of defense or telco, it's normally now occupied by women. And that has become a trend, and so he most possibly will have to continue with those. So it's not simply having an open slate and getting names and put them next to portfolios and then make that announcement. It's a much finer balancing act that has developed over time in order to set up a cabinet.
Sure. I'd also imagine, Professor, that something else that the President is considering is, how effective certain individuals will be in some of these roles. Just looking at public opinion, many don't actually see the President's cabinet as being a cohort of individuals who have the capabilities, who have the wherewithal to get South Africa out of some of these sort of multiple crises the country is facing. And so there's a lot of eyes on who the President will appoint and whether or not they'll be able to deal with, the economic stagnation that the country is having to deal with the electricity and energy crisis and energy insecurity that South Africa has. So I suppose there is that added pressure on the President to ensure that whoever he appoints as a part of this next cohort are individuals who are going to be able to tell a different story for the country come 2024.
Yes, that is very important because he has only about just a little bit more than a year left for this term until the next election, the provincial and national elections. And he must put together a type of a winning team for him, a team that he can take with him into the election, that will create more public confidence, that will attract more support for the ANC, and that will be there to say, well, with this team we can constitute a new government. So it is exceptionally important for him that in his mind he make the right decisions about who is going to put in these positions. And what can also happen is that some of these portfolios can be changed. We talk, up to now, the debate is mainly about the existing portfolios. But, for example, he said in the past that he wants to reduce the number of portfolios, and he did that already in some of the previous cabinet reshuffles. So that's another component. We saw the first one, and that is between electricity or energy and mineral resources already. But that's something that I don't sort of leave out as part of this reshuffling that is going to take place, that he might also change these portfolios. And then at the same time, as I said earlier on, he's limited to members of parliament, and that is, I think, why they created so much or took so much of an effort in order to bring persons from outside of parliament into parliament now, so that he can have a wider choice of persons that he can appoint. Again, persons with either expertise or representing certain interests in society and in the ANC that will create a better perception or public perception about the cabinet for the next 13, 14 months.
Yeah, and I mean, while we have, an appreciation of just how much of a balancing act the president is faced with, this predisposition of his to widely consult with his advisors and alliance partners with the organization, it does seem to be hurting him. We saw, a similar posture right at the height of the Phala Phala allegations, and of course with the release of the Section 89 panel report. This notion to widely consult on what the next step should be, what it creates is the impression of an indecisive leader, one who is unable to simply make a decision, be firm about it, and move the country forward as a result of that.
Well, this is Ramaphosa. This is the Ramaphosa style, whether he is president, whether he was the deputy president, whether he was in the 19th the negotiator, or whether he is the businessman. So in all those different capacities, he did it this way. I think it's part of his DNA. It's part of the way in which he understands how to take important decisions. It's not about that he's under pressure, that he is unsure about his position in the ANC, that there's other political interests that put pressure on him. Certainly all of these things happen, but that's not because of that he's doing this. This is the Ramaphosa style, and I think we are never going to change him in that respect. He believes this is the right way to do it, and this is the way in which he will have the maximum support in whatever decision he takes. That goes back to his days of negotiations as a trade union negotiator and later a constitutional negotiator, and that he brought over into his political career. So we have to make peace with this. This is the Ramaphosa style.
All right. Well, Prof, I suppose only time will tell if this style has indeed favored him.